Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video, we're going to learn the 3 to 7 player game, Freelancers, a Crossroads game designed by Donald Schultz and published by Plaid Hat Games, who helped sponsor this video. Good news, everybody, the Earth is going to be fine. Is there bad news? Yes. Humanity was completely wiped out, but good news, you're not human. Instead, you'll be creating and taking on the role of a whimsical character in search of fame and fortune, or really relevance of any kind. You're not picky, you can't afford to be, because misadventure awaits. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. To get help with the setup, you can use the free web-based app at freelancersgame.com, but I'll walk you through the steps myself right here in this video. First, place this location book in the center of the play area with room for it to be opened later, but for now, leave it closed. Nearby, set the story, treasure, and follower decks, which have these related backs. Shuffle the follower and treasure decks, but leave the story deck in order based on the numbers found in its bottom right-hand corner. Also keep the dice and a supply of the luck, stress, lock, and corruption tokens nearby, which I have in some trays that I own. Now each player should go through this pad and collect one of the unique job sheets. I've already done this, and in this video we'll assume we have 4 players who decide to each take a sheet from the top of the pad. And for my character, I'll select the Ranger. Just know if you ever need more sheets, you can download and print them for free from the Freelancers website. Every player also picks one of the included standees, which represents your species, along with its matching influence token. From this pad, collect a sheet matching your species. The Mouser, in my case. Every player now combines their species and job sheet by setting them side by side in front of themselves. Using a pen or pencil, now invent a name for your character and write it into this space. I'll be Percy Sharpclaw. Next, you'll be asked to define a personal quality. In this case, I decide whether my movements are confident, slow and careful, silent, wonky, loping and feral, or erratic. I've chosen silent. You'll then fill in the blanks for each of the 4 lines listed below. I've chosen these responses: Pencil, Slugs, Cyclops, and Huey Packard. For this last line, I had to pick the name of another character, so I chose this player's hound named Huey. Now find the starting weapon cards, which have the various species on their backs, and find the one that matches your character, flipping it face up and adding it into your weapon slot below the related space of your job sheet here. These 7 boards and tokens make up the 7 different roles and responsibilities the players will be assigned during the game. If you have fewer than 7 players, some will be assigned more than 1 role, but don't worry, these don't help a player win, they just divide the responsibilities players will have to help keep the game running, as we'll see. For example, one player will be the Game Master, and they'll manage the free web-based app that will control various story elements of the game, which again is found at freelancersgame.com, and we'll run that from this device. After going to the website, select Start Quest and pick any one of the maps to play for this session. Each map will have a different story you can play through, and each map can be replayed multiple times. For your first session, they recommend Map A. You now remove that related map from the included map pad, but since this is actually the very top sheet, I'll just leave it on here so I have a thicker pad to write on. The app will ask if you want help setting up the game, but since we're going through this together, I'll select No. You then have to select each of the species and jobs included in your game, which I'll do now. When you're done, tap on Save and Continue. Here, you'll be given a very important code, which they recommend writing on the back of your map like I've done here. This code will help you save your game, as we'll learn about later, but also lets you load up the app on a different device, entering this code into it, so you can continue your game there if you ever want to switch devices while playing. In the app, you can now tap Continue and select a difficulty level. Each scenario has its own built-in difficulty level. Some are easier than others. But here you can further make adjustments, making the current scenario a little easier or harder than it's normally set to. In this case, we'll just choose to stay at the recommended level. Now we're told that the cartographer should be given the map sheet. This is another one of the roles in the game, and this player will be responsible for circling the current location of the players on the map, which at the beginning of the game is the space that says Start here at the bottom. The app now tells each player to read their job backgrounds, which they'll find on the back of their job sheet in the section called Level 1 Backstory. And while reading, anytime they get to a section marked with a number, they read the related word they filled into the matching numbered space over here. For example, my ranger wants to survive with nothing but their wits and a pencil, and I want to wear the skin of a cyclops and cook slugs over a campfire. The app now tells the bookkeeper to open the location book to page 35. The bookkeeper is another role. They'll turn to the required pages of this location book when instructed and read out the resolutions for the actions on its pages. But for now, players should avoid reading this page, so if it helps, you can just keep this page hidden until the game begins. This board is given to the medic. They'll now place one of these wound tokens onto each of its spaces until it's entirely filled in. This board is assigned to the player who will take on the scout role. They turn what is known as this threat dial to the 8th space, and then take the tokens with this back, which are known as threats, and mix them face down, randomly setting one of them into each of the spaces of the threat dial. The scout also collects this time bag and mixes into it the risk tokens, which each show a triangle on them, and the 3 tokens numbered 1, 2, and 3, which have what is known as this follower's symbol on them. The scout also collects and manages all of these purple follower tokens and these brown supply tokens, keeping them nearby. The lookout is another role to assign, and that player takes this board, which they'll use when the game instructs them to. Finally, we have the influencer. This person takes each player's influence marker and randomly fills them into the leftmost spaces of this track. Now, back in the app, you can read the story introduction to your adventure, or if you prefer, hit play and have the text read aloud to you by professional actors.
The world is a wide, weird place.
When you're ready, tap Done, where you'll be taken to the main screen for continuing your adventure. And that's the setup. In Freelancers, a Crossroads game, you and the other players have formed an adventuring party, and for this scenario, you're all desperate for work. So you find yourself in the marketplace hoping anyone will hire you for your specific skills, which currently aren't all that impressive. But these are hard times, and surely someone will soon hire you as a group to go on a quest. As a group, you'll then travel the map to improve your skills, gain items, fight monsters, and attempt to complete your group's quest. You might fail and lose, but if you do complete the quest, each player will be evaluated in their own way. Over the course of the game, you'll gain experience, and on the back of your job sheet, you'll record it on this track. Gain enough and you'll level up. The higher your level by the end of the game, the more successful your adventure and the better outcome you'll be able to provide your character with. Essentially, you're trying to give your character the best possible conclusion to the end of their adventuring story. And with that understood, let's learn how the game is played. As you might remember, during the setup, our bookkeeper was told to turn to page 35. This represents the player's current location. It says here, the hub marketplace. While on a page, the game will be resolved in rounds, and each round is broken into 3 phases, starting with the planning phase. This phase starts as soon as you turn to a new page in the location book. You immediately tap the round timer, shown here, which will start the 45-second countdown timer. If you want to change the countdown length or any of the main settings in the app, you can click the settings icon here and make the adjustments you want, but we'll stick with 45 seconds. Now refer to the influence track, and in order, going from the player in the highest influence position down to the lowest, each person takes a turn adding their standee to an available action found in these numbered boxes. The next player can't place their standee until the player before them has gone. You also shouldn't pay attention to the descriptions for these actions which are shown here. Instead, look at the names of the actions and the symbols, which we'll learn more about later, and take the action that most appeals to you. An action with this blue symbol means that only one player can be assigned here, whereas this green symbol means any number of characters can go here. Sometimes the game may inform you to lock an action, which means you place one of these lock tokens on it. Locked actions can't have a standee assigned to them. When playing, you may encounter a red required action like this. This action must be chosen by exactly one player. So while placing standees, if the number of required action spaces is equal to the number of players who still have to take a turn, those players must take those required actions. If the timer in the app runs out before all of the players have taken an action, pick any one player, even someone who's already gone, and have them gain 1 stress token from the supply. Then all players who haven't placed a standee continue taking actions until they all have. Anytime a player gains stress, they place a stress token onto one of their empty hit point symbols, which look like this. These are also referred to as your HP. And if you'd ever need to gain stress, but you have no empty HP spaces left, just ignore the extra stress that you'd gain. As you'll discover while playing, sometimes actions will require you to gain stress, but if you have no spaces to assign that stress to, you can't gain the benefit of that action. Now, we'll learn more about your hit point spaces later, but for now, let's continue to the action phase, which begins as soon as all of the players have assigned their standees to actions in the location book. Here you start at the top of the action list and go down, stopping at each action with a standee and resolving it. Actions with no standees are skipped, and if more than one character is on the same action, they each perform it in influence order based on this track. To resolve an action, follow the instructions for it detailed in the matching numbered and titled section here on the right. For example, the first action in this case will be visiting the magic shop, so let's go through this one as an example. The first thing it says is Smarts +1. Smarts are one of your character's 5 skills. You'll find all of your skills listed here on your job sheet, and when an effect says +1, it means you increase that related skill by that amount, filling in that number of boxes, 1 in this case. Skills are filled in from left to right, and sometimes the box you fill in will contain an icon. If so, you gain the benefit of that symbol, a coin in this case. Anytime you gain a coin, fill in the leftmost empty space of this gold earned track on your species sheet. The next time we gain a coin, we'd fill in this space and gain the benefit of this symbol. We'll discuss the various symbols over the course of this video. That said, while playing, you may also mark off a space with this experience star symbol. Anytime you gain experience, you flip over your job sheet and fill in the topmost unmarked experience star of this column. Gaining experience is how you reach different levels. Remember, the higher level you are at the end of the game, the better story outcome your character will have, which is what you're aiming for over the course of the game. As you reach one of these level thresholds, for example, level 2, you resolve that related benefit. Here, it says we gain card S23 from the story deck. That means you go through this deck and find the card numbered 23 here in the corner and collect it. We'll learn about the different types of cards and how they're resolved a little later, but just know if you would gain a story card that another player already has, you just take it from them. Going back to skills for a moment, if you were to gain a skill but had already filled in all the spaces of its row, you just ignore that gained skill. Okay, with that, we just covered gaining skills, gaining coins, gaining experience, and leveling up, and this was all from the start of just one action. So let's get back to it. When visiting the magic shop after gaining a smarts skill, we're then told to make a smarts check. Anytime you're told to make a check using one of your skills, you follow 4 steps in order. First, take one of the 20-sided dice, which look like this, and then check the rightmost space that you filled in for the skill that you're testing, smarts in this case. You now gain as a bonus die the one showing above the filled-in box, the yellow 4-sided one in this case. The more boxes you fill in, the better the bonus. You would now roll the dice and add their values together, but you also add any other modifiers you might have to that skill. As we saw, you can gain cards while playing, and these may have skill modifiers printed on them like this. If we had this card, it means anytime we make a smarts check, we'd add +4 to the total that we rolled. You may also have some tokens that can help or hurt your skill check. For example, if later in the game we fill in this space of our gold track, we see this symbol, which means we gain one of these luck tokens. After rolling dice for a check, you can return a luck token that you have to the supply to re-roll any one die. And you can do this as often as you want to, as long as you have a luck token to spend each time. Some effects will show this symbol, which cause you to gain a corruption token from the supply, which look like this. If you have any of these, it means you may not roll a bonus die during a skill check, but after the skill check is over, you then return one corruption back to the supply. Once you no longer have corruption on future skill checks, you can again roll the bonus die. Anytime you roll dice, you can ask for help from the other players. Any player other than the one making the skill check can choose to gain 1 stress to allow you to re-roll a die of your choice, and players can do this multiple times during the same check. Either way, once you have your final result, you compare it to the possible outcomes for that check. In this case, if we have a value from 1 to 14, we enter 3504. But if we have a value of 15 or higher, we enter 3505. In this case, we have a total of 13, so we'd go to 3504. When told to enter a value, go to the app and type it in here. The common values for the page you're on are also shown in this area, so you can just tap the related number to have it automatically entered. Either way, you then tap Go when you're ready. You now read or hit play to listen to the related entry. And then you resolve the effects at the bottom in the order they're listed. Let's go through these together, where first it says we lose 6 influence. Anytime you lose influence, move your marker that number of spaces towards the lower end of this track, stopping as soon as you get to the end of any other tokens. So if I lost 6 influence, that would put me here. You then shift all the other tokens to close in any gaps to the left. When you gain influence, you move your token to the left. So if I gain 2 influence, I would move 1, 2 spaces. But you can never share a space with another player, so you shift the other markers over to make room. If you gain influence past this end of the influence track, you ignore any extra moves owed, and as this symbol shows here, instead return a single corruption to the supply if you have any. So for example, if I went up by 5 influence, I would just move 1 space, ignore the rest, and then I could return 1 corruption token that I might have back to the supply. Speaking of corruption, the next result of our skill check is to gain 1 corruption, which we take from the supply and keep in front of ourselves. Then we gain the title, Member of the Wall of Shame, and note the symbol here. When you gain a title, go to your job sheet and circle the related symbol by the topmost empty title space. This symbol represents a chaotic title, and this represents a lawful title. You can think of these as good and evil aspects of your character's behavior. Either way, you then record the name of the title you earned in the space beside it. And as it says here, you gain 1 experience star for every 4 titles you earn. So after earning your 4th title, you gain an experience, and another one after gaining your 8th title. Once you've gained a title, no other player can gain that same title, and you cannot have the same title more than once. And with that, we've resolved the skill check and can tap Done. When an action is complete, you take back your standee from the space, and the next action with a standee is resolved. Now though, I want to show you how to resolve any situation where you're told to gain treasure. The plus value indicates how many treasure you gain, in this case 1. Anytime you gain treasure, draw it from this deck, and if the deck ever runs out, shuffle its discard pile into a new deck. Either way, after drawing, place it face up in front of you and resolve it based on its type. There are 4 different types of treasures you may draw: trinkets, armor, weapons, and weapon augments, each with their own unique symbols in their top left-hand corners. Trinkets also have a yellow banner at the top, and when gained are added to the right side of your character sheet. Be sure to read the trinkets you gain, as they may have an immediate effect when added to your character. For example, when we equip this card, we gain a corruption token. Trinkets often have a benefit you can use during the game, like the one that we see here. Many will also give you a bonus to any checks you make for a certain skill. This is the Smarts symbol, so for any Smarts check I perform, when I have this equipped, I add +4 to the related roll. Some trinkets have a discard effect. These can't be resolved during another effect, such as a skill check, but otherwise mean that you can send the trinket to a shared discard pile to resolve its effect. Here, we'd gain 1 corruption token and 2 followers. When told to gain followers, draw them from the top of the followers deck, adding them to the follower slots at the bottom of your character sheet. Each will have a number shown in their bottom right-hand corner. You then take the matching numbered follower tokens from the face-up supply and add them to the time bag. You can have at most 2 followers at a time. If you would ever gain more than that, either discard the follower you just gained and don't add its token to the bag, or replace a follower that you already have, adding the new token for the new follower into the bag, but leaving the old one still in it. We'll learn more about the tokens in this bag a little later, but for now, let's get back to resolving treasures, and specifically, trinkets. You can have 2 trinkets at a time. If you gain a third, either discard the new one or replace a trinket that you already have. Just keep in mind, any card being discarded for this reason doesn't resolve any discard effect it may have. Another type of treasure is armor. These will go in your armor slot here, and at most you can have one armor card equipped at a time. These will often give you an extra HP slot where you can either assign stress or wound tokens. We'll learn more about wounds later, but armor may also grant a bonus to certain skill checks as shown in this corner. So here we gain +2 to our agility tests. Players also have one weapon slot for adding weapons to. You begin with a starting weapon, but weapons are another type of treasure that you might gain, so I might replace my old weapon with this new one. In addition to their ongoing benefit, many weapons will also give you a bonus to certain skill checks. More importantly, these will generally gain you a bonus to weapon checks. Sometimes the game will ask you to perform a weapons check, which works just like a skill check, except here, your bonus die is determined by your weapon. If you don't have a weapon when you would make a weapons check, just roll a d20 with no bonus die added in. Some weapons have what are known as trait icons below their name. These don't have any effect until the game says otherwise. Some cards are known as weapon augments. These will show the weapon symbol in their top left-hand corner, but with an upward arrow. If you already have a weapon and then gain an augment, you can either discard the weapon and replace it with the augment, or discard the augment and keep the weapon, or attach the augment to the weapon by sliding it underneath so only its top bar is showing. A weapon can have any number of augments, and if the weapon is later traded or discarded, the augments go with it. If you gain an augment when you have no weapon, you can still add the augment to your weapon slot, while here, everything but this no weapon ability is ignored, which can be used during a weapon check. If you then gain a weapon later, you can attach the augment to it or get rid of it if you no longer want it. And that covers all the various treasure types you might gain. Just keep in mind, an effect might cause you to discard treasure like this one does. This means you pick a treasure you have and discard it face up next to the deck that it came from. However, an effect like this that requires you to lose something in order to gain something else must be ignored if you don't have the required item to spend. We saw that your character might gain weapons and armor, and that's going to help when you get into a fight. The way a fight is resolved will be explained during the game as you play, but let me give you a quick overview. If the app informs you that you're battling enemies, like this part of the story does, it will usually tell you to set a lettered dial to a particular value, in this case, to the current threat. Your current threat is based on the space that this dial is pointing to on the scout board. Currently, it's 8. But this very small icon beneath it means that you add the number of characters in your game to this value. So 4 in this case, which brings our total threat to 12. We were told to set dial A to this value, which is done here on the lookout board. The battle itself might take place on a page like this, where you'll assign standees to the various actions as the timer runs. Many of the actions will involve checks that allow you to attack and potentially reduce the value on a dial. This usually represents damage that you're doing to the enemies you're facing and will improve the outcomes that the app provides you as the fight goes on. That said, some outcomes might cause wounds. Anytime you're told to gain a wound, collect the leftmost wound token from the medic track and add it to any one of your empty HP spaces. If you take a wound and you have no spaces left to assign it to, then your character isn't defeated. In fact, they continue to play as normal. But the wound itself is instead added to the time bag, and we'll see how this can affect things later. However, if all of the wound tokens have been removed from the wound track, the party has become too injured to carry on and everybody loses. You then enter the code shown here into the app. If an effect lets a player heal HP, which is represented by this symbol, it means they either discard one stress token back to the supply or return one wound token back to the wound track. Everything else you need to know about resolving attacks you'll discover as you play. So for now, let's go back and wrap up the action phase. After every player has resolved their action space and taken back their standee, the action phase ends and it's time for the end of round phase. Here you go into the app and add the code shown in the round end box of the current page you're on. Sometimes you'll get an instruction like this where you're told to close the location book and travel on the map. To do this, look at the space of the map you're currently on. For us, this is the start space, and then collectively decide where you want to go next by picking the next icon connected by a dashed path. Now, right now, we only have this one option. But let's say we were here. We could then go to either of these two spots. Either way, after making your decision, you spend one time. Spending time is something that happens when traveling, but it can also happen anytime the game tells you to. So let's see how spending time works. Here, a random token is drawn from the bag and resolved. So let's go through the different types of tokens and see how they work. These are both risk tokens. When you draw these, add them to the leftmost spaces of their matching tracks here on the scout board. This type goes to the top row and this one goes to the bottom. When you draw a token like this that shows a plus symbol, after resolving it, in this case it goes on the top row, you must then draw another token from the bag. Here I've drawn a wound token, and when this happens, you add it to either of the rows. I'll put it down here. As soon as a token gets placed on the last space of either row, the threat level increases. To do this, turn the dial here one space clockwise and then add the threat token on that space to the bag. You also return all of the tokens on both threat tracks back to the bag as well. We saw that the threat level was used during fights, but it may also be used at other times as well. A higher threat is more dangerous for the adventurers, and if this dial ever gets all the way around to this final game over space, the quest has become too challenging and the party breaks up. Every player loses, and you enter the code here into the app. We also saw that as this dial is advanced, the tokens in its space are then added to the bag, and each has a secret effect on the other side that shouldn't be seen until the token is drawn from the bag. So let's go through and see how each of these is resolved. These two act as regular risk tokens, which get added to their related tracks, and each of these have a plus symbol, which means you then draw another token from the bag. If you draw this one instead, you place it on the risk track of your choosing. Resolving this token means that all players who can must lose one of their luck tokens. Then this token is removed from the game. With the resolution of this token, each player must gain one corruption, and then this token is removed from the game as well. Some effects in the game will cause you to gain supplies, like we see here. Anytime this happens, take a supply token and add it to the time bag. When you draw a supply token from the bag, it doesn't go to the threat track, you just return it to the general supply. Which is why it's good to get supply tokens into your bag. Nothing good happens, but nothing bad happens either. Likewise, if you draw a follower token from the bag, it's also not added to a risk track. Instead, you enter the code shown on its back into the app and follow the instructions there. So as you can see, the more time advances, the more tokens you have to draw, potentially filling up these threat tracks, which is bad. However, sometimes an effect will tell you to reduce risk. For example, here we're told to subtract 2 from risk. For each risk you're told to subtract, remove any token from any track to the bag, shifting any remaining tokens left behind as necessary to remove any gaps. With that, we've covered how spending time works, but remember, we started talking about this because you spend time when you travel on the map. After deciding where you're going to go next and spending time, you then cross out your current position and draw a line along the path you're traveling, circling the very next symbol you come to. This is your party's new location. Note this symbol, and in the app, tap that icon. In this case, it was a campsite. Here, we're given some story and steps to resolve, including the option to perform camp actions. So let's learn about those next. Camp actions are listed in this area of your 2 sheets, and to perform one, just mark off its space and resolve its effect. For example, I might mark off this space in order to reduce our risk by 1. Once marked off, you can't use that same camp action later. You'd have to pick any one of the others. After we finish at the campsite, the app tells us that we now travel the map again. So we pick a new location to go to, spend 1 time, and mark our path, clicking this icon within the app. Now let's say it was later in the game, and instead we were over here at this location known as a trading post. While here, players may freely give or exchange treasure cards with one another. While trading, any cards that have tokens on them will stay on those cards as they're traded, and augments stay attached to any weapons they're currently attached to. Otherwise, players cannot trade treasures with each other at any other time in the game. This can only happen while they're at trading posts. I should also mention that when traveling, a party can select a path they've already traveled previously. It still costs 1 time per space they enter, but if the space they go to is already crossed out, they don't select anything in the app. Instead, they must immediately travel again. You might do this to get to a location on the map you didn't go to previously. For example, we might travel to here in order to resolve this tavern location. After some amount of traveling, you'll likely be told to turn to a new page in the location book, and then you'll resolve a regular round where you plan by adding your standees to the actions on the page, resolving those actions, and then you resolve the end of the round. And rounds will continue like this until the game ends in one of 3 possible ways. Either because the party got too wounded, exposing this space of the medic board, or the threats became too great because the dial on the scout board reached this space. If either of those endings happen, the players all lose. However, if an entry in the app instructs you that you've completed the quest, then the game ends in victory. For the most part. Going from the highest to the lowest influence player, each person now reads out their full name, including any titles they've earned. Then they flip over their job sheet and read out the ending that relates to the highest experience level that they reached. The higher the level, the better the ending. Not only that, the player with the most titles may now write their full name, including those titles, onto the pipes of the hub page of the rulebook, where their name will live on forever. This game is really more about the adventure that you go on together than it is about declaring a winner, but if your group needs a specific winner, then it's the person who got to write on the pipes. If more than one player has the most titles, then you can break the tie based on the influence order as usual. And don't forget, the game has 5 different maps to play through, and you can play the same map more than once. The main storyline will stay the same, but the way you experience it will change. While playing, if you need to take a break and put the game away, you can very easily save the game by following the steps here in the rulebook, which you can pause and read if you're curious. But otherwise, that's everything you need to know to play Freelancers, a Crossroads game. If you have any questions at all about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. And if you'd like to support us directly, you can join our Patreon team, which I'll have linked below. But until next time, thanks for watching.